When it comes to determining if a map is good or not, there's a lot of subjectivity in this topic. My initial thought was to refer back to the ranking criteria and see how well maps adhere to it, but that doesn't really say much about the perceived enjoyment of a map. The ranking criteria does a good job of ensuring the baseline of quality for maps, such as timing concerns, difficulty spread, and playability, which I'll go into in depth later. Outside of that, there aren't really any rules about how fun a map should be. A lot of maps intentionally edge the line of certain RC guidelines, and you can even have the opposite criticisms of maps being too generic for not trying new and different ideas. After looking around map comments and some of the more controversial maps within this mode, it seems like this playability aspect is what players complain about when they choose to judge a map as bad. If you're unable to play through a map entirely and set a score, then it can be difficult to really find enjoyment out of the map, as it's a visceral reminder of exactly what skill sets you struggle with. This is just my own little theory though, as not all players are like this. There's quite a number of players who find enjoyment out of the challenge that some of these more technical and strain-inducing maps bring, and detest the idea of playing maps above 99 accuracy. However majority of the players lean, we'll see that by the end of this video. The main metric we have to go off of is the beatmap user rating, as it's sort of a thumbs up, thumbs down system, but even with something like this, there can be flaws. I do want to point out that it's good to force a user to play the map before they're able to rate it, but if you exit the screen too quickly, you'll have to replay the entire map to get a chance to rate it. That's a little bit okay, as it forces the map to be fresh on your mind at the time of rating, but it can be a bit tedious for marathon maps if you forget. The main complaint expressed by players is how each rating is grouped together with all difficulties in a beatmap. Something like this is probably necessary for browsing new maps, as it's a single number to quickly get an idea of how the map is perceived. But what if there's cases where everyone collectively rates all difficulties within a set besides one of them? Is it fair to have a map weighted against itself like this? Perhaps an average of ratings across the different difficulties would give a better idea of the map set as a whole, as well as displaying the individual rating on a per difficulty basis. Retry stats are done in this style, so it would fit well with this current system. Maybe in a future update, KcHecKa could give ratings a bit more importance and bring it to the forefront of players' attention, if that's a data metric we want to further put emphasis on. With all of that explanation out of the way, I'd like to present the top 10 lowest rated Mania maps, with a few caveats. For one, newer maps are more prone to the extreme ends of the scale, as they usually have a lesser number of players rating them. All it takes is 1 or 2 players for a map to have 100% positivity turn into 60% negativity. So this list will only include maps ranked in 2022 or earlier, and slider velocity maps. I kind of went into this in my previous SV map video, but there's just a huge negative bias towards these types of maps, to the point where this list would be just full of them. So this is me acknowledging SV maps exist, but we will be excluding them for the sake of this video. But even with this exclusion, I'm still sure an overwhelming majority of these maps will be some of the more difficult maps in the ranked category, especially the ones that aren't accurately reflected in their star rating. This map appearing on this list at all is honestly a bit shocking to me, and I guess it's simply because it's a dump map, which I'll explain later in this video. I think we can assume that the main thing players have trouble with in this map is the stamina component. For a runtime of nearly 7 minutes, there's only this one low density part, which only lasts for about 10 seconds, before the song picks back up again. The song seems to be comprised of real-life instruments, and the mapper decides to represent the sounds, such as high-pitched guitar riffs, with string patterns of various timing divisions. We can see how the song choice affects the map design within the timing changes. This happens in a lot of classical or live music, where most of the instruments were not computer generated, and the music is a bit more freeform. Sitting down and timing each individual BPM change, along with normalizing the scroll speed, is honestly quite commendable, not even mentioning the map design itself. The map seems to be following the guitar melody through most of it, and then layers in the drums in between phrases. This whole song really has this upbeat energy to it that just goes on, and the patterns reflect that continuity as you swap between focusing on the different instruments in the song. Everything just keeps moving, and you really have to remain present through a map like this to keep up. Honestly, one of the most interesting maps I've played from 2022, and for this to be Ska's first ranked beat map, I hope to see more from him in this genre. Immediately, it's clear as to why this map appears on this list. But compared to a lot of other long note maps, this one is definitely on the easier side. I can see the mapper's intent here, as the bassy synth noises are easily reflected in the long notes here, but the choice of layering in some of these parts are a bit messy to me. In the beginning section, it's really easy to understand which long note is being mapped to what, and your brain can really ground itself on the 1-1 Ellen sizes, as well as it's basically the same pattern repeated over itself. But later in the song, the choices of the different Ellen lengths just seems odd to me. Why are these ones short, when that sort of tapping sound will probably fit better here? There are a bit more background sounds going on here compared to the beginning of the song, but I can't really make any sense of this. It does have that same repetition motif going on, so once you do play the pattern correctly, it's easy to get the rest of them down. I'm going on and on about layering and everything, when in reality, even if this map was layered in the most correct way possible, whatever that may look like, and represented the music as best as it could, players would still be complaining anyway. Just like with SV maps, a lot of players are unfamiliar with playing long note, and it seems to be an instinct reaction to complain about certain skill sets that you particularly don't like. There's not much to say about this one. It faces a similar issue to Blue Lagoon, but instead of guitar sounds, long sustained vocals are being mapped with streams. There's also the stamina component and a relatively long runtime. Compared to a lot of other maps around 4.5 stars, you can already imagine the skill difference needed to play something like this versus something like this. It might seem like an irrelevant detail, but I honestly think this map wouldn't be rated so low if it were at least 5.2 stars or somewhere around there. The song choice itself probably doesn't appeal to the broader Osu Mania audience, so this is one of the more obscure maps we'll be looking at. This is a proper hard map. Only 5.9 stars, but it's 277 dense streams for a runtime of 7 minutes. Had to play this one on halftime. We can see the BPM changes as well with this one, so we know we're dealing with live instruments. Pretty much, once the map starts up, it does not let off the gas, all the way until the 6-minute mark. I'm failing to really see anything objectively bad about this map. It's an intense song, so naturally the map will reflect that intensity. The pattern choices throughout the map are pretty consistent, guitars and the vocals being mapped to streams, and only 5 long notes appearing in this map. The only thing I can think of is that people are complaining about the difficulty of this map, or at least the difficulty compared to the given star rating, which is honestly not fair to base a judgment of this map off of, seeing as the mapper has little control over what the calculator decides to give their map in instances like this. If the map was given a 6.5 or 7-star rating, then the difficulty would match the expectation of the player going into the map, and I think they might be a little bit more accepting of just how intense these patterns are. This map got a lot of people riled up in the comments, and we'll finally get our explanation of dump mapping. Joel states, in general, this mapping style works by capturing sounds and intensities in a non-strict way, hence the streams to the extended vocal sounds. While this is true for the previous dump maps we've seen so far, and for most sections of this map, there are a few awkward sections here, particularly this part right here. The music is doing a simple 4 on the floor rhythm, with the bass overlaying some simple 1/4 here and there. Nothing about this section of the song is particularly intense, nor is the rhythm very complex, yet the mapper applies 1/6 streams here, with jumps that don't even match up to the music at all. The actual sound the jump is trying to represent happens 40 milliseconds after the jump is placed. This section may be fun to play, but it's simply not following the music as well as it could be, and it may throw players' sense of rhythm off. Whether the rest of the map is overmapped or not, that can be a little subjective, but a good portion of players did voice their concerns in the comments. This is another weird one in that there's nothing particularly concerning about this map. It seems charted similarly to how most Camilla songs are in this genre, except for one thing, the star rating. Now, I may be a bit biased towards things like this, because I can relate to the confusion and frustration a player might face when going into a map that they expect to be one way, and is completely out of their comfort zone. For a lot of my own maps, if I'm placing a lot of tricky and awkward patterns, I try to balance out the star rating by adding density. There's even a higher star map for the song that has a much higher user rating. But again, this is only the star difficulty number and not the real perceived difficulty experienced by the player. In fact, if we compare the two leaderboards, both of them have around the same amount of average score. So in a way, the higher star map may feel more rewarding, whether that be because of PP values awarded or from the star rating number itself. This is all theoretical though, as I don't really have a concrete way of knowing. One thing's for certain though, and that's me not having too much experience with 7K mapping to really point out what's wrong about this map, if there's anything wrong about it at all. That's the thing with these sort of rating systems. Any player can rate a map any number based on whatever qualifications they want. But I guess overall, players collectively don't like this map as much as other maps. Another one of those maps where I'm not exactly familiar with it, nor do I have a score set on it. This is just one of those maps that have so much going on with it. Mini jacks, short long notes, long notes, various timing divisions, a proper technical map. In fact, maybe even too technical. One of the comments expresses the sentiment. AWN Roan states, first of all, the first feeling of playing is that the pattern is very strange and the hands are very uncomfortable. Even if a fairly high act is achieved, it is difficult to get high scores, and it's easy to form mind block. In other words, the complex rhythm and sound effects make this map. Therefore, although I get a poor score, and the music doesn't taste me, I finally choose to give this map 10 stars. While I don't fully understand the exact feelings of this player, for them to be within the top 200 global ranking and to express this awkwardness experienced in the map, it really goes to show how technical some of these patterns really are. And perhaps a lot of other players don't share this positive outlook towards the map, as we can see by the numbers and scores achieved on this map. This map is garbage. Okay, that may be too harsh. I don't even know why I don't like this map, or why other people also share this feeling. Maybe it really is just a skill issue. This sort of mapping seems to be very niche, as it has one of the lowest play counts on this list, as well as a decent number of 9 and 10 ratings, and because of that, maybe the user rating is a bit skewed. It seems to be a dump style of mapping with heavy long note usage. While this song isn't particularly fast or use technical rhythm so much, it does carry a sort of high energy in a lot of these sections, and the mapping choices reflect that. I guess my main complaint here is that a lot of the long note choices seem a bit random, and they're not exactly mapped to any particular sound that you can really pick out. They also seem to cut off at inconsistent timing divisions, and the whole thing just seems messy to follow and annoying to play. But again, I'm not the most experienced 7K mapper, and with the style of mapping also comes the freeform nature of song expression and pattern choices that don't exactly need to be consistent throughout the entire map. Of all the maps on this list, this is definitely the least enjoyable one I've played and had the most trouble with, but there's still 2 maps remaining. It always feels a little strange to me how tournament maps sometimes get ranked. It sort of implies you need to be a tournament level player in order to set a score on it. But anyway, this is probably one of the hardest ranked 4K maps in the game, depending on your preferred skill sets. It's my 3rd lowest S score, and this was at a time where I was supposedly really warm to the game. So in a way, it could be considered my worst score. We have another one of those cases where the star rating doesn't exactly match what the player's expectation probably is, and we can see that clearly with some of these pattern choices. The main section of the song has full long note 255 jump streams, which leads into the mini tech section, while still sustaining the long notes. I don't think the technicality of holding one finger down and doing decks with the other finger on the same hand is fully realized within the difficulty calculator, which leads to this map feeling much harder than the star rating suggests. The ending section introduces 1/6 bursts mixed with 1/4 jump streams, and the player has to swap between the timing divisions while keeping up with the speed and stamina of it all. This is definitely reflective of a tournament tiebreaker map. Compared to a lot of other maps in this list, this map does an excellent job of representing the music, as the song itself is rather chaotic. So I'm failing to see what exactly about this map is something that players would objectively complain about, outside of the sheer difficulty alone. While it's not my preferred style of mapping, for players who are of this caliber of skill, it should be nice for them to get said maps to fit their level of ability. And here is the lowest rated Mania map, somewhat of an obscure map of a niche genre of music. Seems like majority of players really like this one, or was somewhat in the middle, but I guess OSU categorizes ratings as above 5 or below 5, which probably doesn't do a good job of accurately reflecting what players felt down to the number. Again, nothing particularly concerning about this map, just some of the same topics we've seen in the previous maps. Stamina and high strain throughout the entirety of the map, a mapping style that isn't fully realized or fully appreciated within the OSU Mania community, a song from a genre of music that isn't mainstream or as common here, and a star rating number that can be a little deceptive to unsuspecting players. Combining all these factors, and what we're left with is the worst beat map in OSU Mania. When in reality, it's just a niche map that caters to a specific audience that likes a particular style of mapping. And this kind of leads into 2 future topics I'd like to explore. Do the higher rated maps necessarily mean that the maps are better, or do they just have a higher rating because they appeal to a broader audience, such as mapping popular anime songs, or maps with simple patterns that are accessible to lesser experienced players? And what are some aspects of maps that we as players give too much value when it comes to rating maps, such as PP values rewarded and the star rating number alone? Those are some thoughts to think about. Anyway, to conclude this video, criticism is always nice, as it leads us to improvement. But if you suspect players are downrating your map simply because of the skill level or star rating, or even because they didn't like the song, you should not feel the need to conform to these complaints within your future maps. If someone is voicing real concerns about pattern choices or bringing up the RC guidelines in a legitimate way, then it may be worth listening to, though this says a lot about how undervalued and underutilized qualified status is. I genuinely feel that none of the maps presented in this video are inherently bad, and I do not intend on offending any mappers in this video, except for this map. This map is garbage. If you have any thoughts, questions, or topics I should discuss in a future video, leave them in the comments below. I'll make an effort to respond to every comment on this video.